when people started coming to see me, on many occasions I said to Phil, what do they come for? Because I really didn't understand what on earth they come for. And you know, I still don't know. I'm not joking. And I'll make it clear to you as the talk goes on, I hope. Because I don't know what we're about. Let's see. Now, one thing I've learned, especially since I've been in the public eye, is that when I don't know what to do or what to say, which I don't, is to become still. So I invite you just, well, you are nice and still now. Well, let's just stay still and silent for a few moments. No, you see, I don't know what it is, and neither do you. Yet it's obvious enough, isn't it? Now then, we've had 2 days of very interesting knowledge being put into us, and now we find ourselves at the point of not knowing. It's actually rather nice, isn't it? And I certainly feel much safer not knowing than pretending I do. So I wonder if we can explore it a little bit further. How did it all start? Yes, I feel safe when I'm being quiet and I'm still. I feel safer being silent than when I'm talking. I don't really trust my tongue. I'm a bit nervous of what it might come out with. I think it goes back a long time. I was brought up a country boy. It was before and just during the war, where there was very little contact with other children. We lived isolated in the country. And at the age of 7, it was a big shock. I was sent to boarding school. Suddenly I discovered what other little boys were. I didn't like it very much at all. And I soon recognized the safety of going out from their company and once again finding my beloved fields where I could be quiet. So I think I found the sanctuary of silence and began to recognize it very early in my life. And I think I've always instinctively, when I felt over-peopled, I've just gone outside and immediately felt better. Yes, gone out to the trees and the grass and feel better. Just as simple as that. Long before I knew what spirit was, we even thought about such things. So I suggest that perhaps I'm not the only one, really, that find comfort in just looking out of the window, just at green things and the sky. Just if we can't actually go out there and be there, just as a reminder that it's there. A world other than the world of man. Yes, that's it, a world other than the world of man. I was lucky enough, I was a farmer for most of my active years, so I spent most of that just working alone in the quiet fields. I was lucky to be brought up when there were still more horses on the farms than tractors, and chemicals hadn't really been invented. So farming was as it's always been, really, and that's the way I've always done it. And like many people in those days, farming was considered a way of life. It wasn't a business, and there was a recognition of what was natural and what was called artificial. Chemicals were generally lumped under the name artificial. Natural, it ain't natural. Artificial. And I think there's a very good distinction, really. It still applies today, doesn't it? What's natural and what's unnatural. That's really the nux of the whole thing, isn't it? We find ourselves rather embarrassingly unnatural, and we're all yearning to be natural. It's not so easy, is it, once one gets out of the rut? So that's really what it's about. And then I found myself, brought up after 10 years of boarding school and being expected to be what I was expected to be, and I lost my confidence, I suppose, in being quiet and tried to be what I was expected to be, not very successfully. But after the army, I was sent out to Australia, and so I had of course, there weren't aeroplanes then, or they weren't used for ordinary traffic, so I went by sea. Another great experience to find the quiet of the field suddenly expanded into the mighty expanse of the ocean. And that was a great experience. 6 weeks out to Australia, 2 months coming back by sea. Wow. Great experience. What a tragedy. We all now go by aeroplane and miss the great experience of a long sea voyage. All that we've been talking about is just obvious when you're in an environment like that, aren't you? You don't need words. Any fool can see it. There's something bigger than man. And in that we feel comforted. We feel reassured. There's a peace in it, a feeling better. So in Australia, my one dream in those days, I wanted to be a cowboy, and I wanted to see what the world was like before men messed it up. And I was both, thank God. and that my first experience of the open bush and the silence. I wasn't able to express it then, but I remember it. There's a lovely, when the creaking of the saddle is the only sound you hear. Because it was all horses then, all horses. Cowboy's young man's dream come true. Anyway, back to England after the long voyage through the South Seas. And then this awful shock of coming back into the world again. That's always the trouble. We go on these great adventures, you're expanded into a world, like that, and then you've got to come back and be normal and think about money and life and job and all these things. Well, I wasn't very good at it at all. But I started farming. I knew all about organic farming because during the war, Dad had a pal who was a military doctor. And in field hospitals, when wounded soldiers came in, he'd noticed how flies tend to sit on sick people, where there's a blood and gangrene and stuff, and that would attract the flies. Whereas a healthy man, of course, flies don't normally come and sit on you, do they? So that very simple demonstration of what attracts disease, and so healthy people, give and take a few, don't get sick, whereas the unhealthy ones do. And of course the same applies to the land. Now then, a healthy soil, what's that all about? Well, of course, this was my theme then. And at that time there were one or two other thoughtful people who were beginning to think about the health of the soil. Of course, every farmer's always considered the health of the soil, but they brought it out and sort of, in contrast to the way civilization was going, they began to think about the essence of a healthy soil. And therefore, if the soil is healthy, what's grown on it is healthy, which leads to healthy nutrition, doesn't it? Which leads to healthy, well, one hopes anyway, a more healthy society. Obvious, isn't it? So all this interested me very much. So I was beginning to think then about how to get involved with the world, and I saw the world. I saw civilization. I didn't like it. I didn't like machines. I always tried to farm without machinery, by hand, using the old hand tools and the old crafts, and just try to rebel and not be civilized. Barefoot and all that sort of thing. All the good habits I learned out in Australia. Well, I injured my back, and I went and I had to go into business, and I couldn't bear that. So after a few years, full of, at that time, the third world was beginning to be recognised as a place of poverty, and poor nutrition. Little pictures of little starving children were appearing in the papers. So I thought this was my mission, to go out to feed the hungry world. So off I went to South America. They were giving grants of 1,000 hectares of Bolivian jungle then to anybody who'd go and settle it. So I thought with my axe I'd go out there and fell the jungle and grow food and for a grateful world. Well, it didn't quite work out like that, but I found myself as part of an agricultural program in Peru and started reforesting the Andes. Yes, Roger, I planted a few trees in my time too. I was going to reforest the whole Andes. That the old Inca civilization had cut down. They haven't grown since. So that was that. And then one day, after not being very successful, I was sitting up on the mountainside, and a strange thing happened. It was like a little voice said to me, "To make whole, be whole." Now, at 26 years old, I didn't really understand that, of course. But, that stuck with me all my life. In fact, Phil's even done a T-shirt with "To make whole, be whole" on the thing. So it's gone viral now, but that's how it started. And where was I? Wait a minute. Oh yes, that's right. Yes, and I saw myself as an immature young man with a bit of knowledge, trying to teach people much older and wiser than me. In other words, I knew this would happen with my voice. In other words, the local Andean Indians were older and wiser than me, how to live, and someone had recently sent me a little book which had mentioned meditation. So when my time was up, I came back to England and I looked for a system of meditation. And at that time, before internet, there were very, very few. I only ever found one place to teach me. That was in London. And I'd already then got some sheep up in Derbyshire, And it was a terrible thing, really, to have to go to London for instruction, but I did. And so I learned to meditate when I was 26. I was very, very well taught, thank God, and I practiced twice a day ever since. That's as near as can be to 60 years ago. So goodness knows how many hours I've clocked up in all that time, and I've hardly missed it at all, really. Well, I can't say it's always easy, but the one thing I've learned is that you've got to practice it. Any fool can learn to meditate. The difficult bit is practicing it and keep on practicing. And those of you who know I meditate a long time now, don't be taken in by that. What you need is just little bits regularly. I was started with quarter of an hour, and that's quite enough to anybody, long enough for anyone who's starting. Then gradually extend it. But there's rarely good cause to go beyond half an hour. That's the recommended amount, and I wouldn't encourage anyone to do more than that unless you're like at my stage of life and you've nothing much else to do, really. So there's meditation came into the picture. Now then, I had to go to London, and I can tell you, and I did my first practice in St Pancras Station waiting room, late one evening. No, it wasn't some blissful hermitage on top of a mountain or anywhere like that. It was the least conducive place you could imagine. Late at night, because I had to get the late night train back to feed my animals next morning. And there and then, and do you know what happened? It opened up, just like that. And you know, I realized I no longer had to go to Australia or South America to find the wide open spaces that I loved. They were all within me. Now, what a lesson for a young man of 26, eh? Well, that was a great discovery. And, you know, it's gone on ever since. And there was another great discovery that came to me very early in the early days. I'd been sort of persuaded to read a bit of philosophy, which I didn't really get on with very well. But I was reading books about the faith and anything really. And there's a book, you probably know it, a medieval classic, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. I was reading this, and after this experience, I suddenly thought, well, good heavens, this is what they're talking about. This is spirit. This is the kingdom of God, isn't it? This is that which we don't know. Actually, I don't think it was at that time. I think it was probably a week or two later that I began to say that. And I realized that meditation makes spirituality practical. That's the word about it. You see, it's not just talk, it's not ideas, it's not thinking. It's making spirituality practical. That's the great thing about it. You can experience it, it's in your head. But it's not a thought, it's realization. It's a method of realization, making real. Just like I showed you, just coming into stillness. We don't know what it is. You can't describe it. And yet it's real, isn't it? Who can say it isn't real? And so it is in meditation. You see, if you've got a good, effective technique, you simply do this. If you see my hands, you do this. So you let go. There, even in a noisy waiting room, you just let go. Just listen to this little mantra or whatever you have, and it's like that. And you find, well, you may find, I've been doing it 60 years, and you never have the same experience. It's always different, like a sunset. You never see the same thing twice. So it's always pretty silly asking what happens or what results to aim for, because you never know. You're going into unknown territory. But just like every sunset is always new, so it is in meditation, in real experience. It's only in this world that you get repetition. So this starts a great adventure, the adventure without end. And you know, my dears, I'm as thrilled about it now as I was 60 years ago, and it gets ever better. So, now then, where do I go from here? Should have mentioned at first that if any of you want to prompt me, I'd welcome it, because otherwise I might just stop. Well, let's just come back to silence and see if that prompts anything. Let's find again this lovely silence, you see. All we've got to do is just, that's right, try to keep the body still, and then listen. That's right. If we can just open our listening up a little bit. Yes, it's sort of comforting, isn't it? You're sort of safe. I feel safe there. And you know, there's only one stillness for all of us, isn't there? It's not divided. And what happened to your body while we were still? You just left it behind on the chair, didn't you? And the chair kindly held it up for you. And then you just... What happened to your thoughts? Did you leave any of them behind? And then we come back again, and here's the good servant, the body. This silence is still here. Look at it. Even while I'm talking, the silence is here, isn't it? Well, what a simple realization, isn't it? That in the midst of many, there is one, undivided. How can it be so simple, so immediate, so easy, so unquestionable? Meditation really is a method of realization, because with practice, stillness can expand, it becomes ever more significant, really. With practice, you can live in a busy town and be in noisy situations. All the bombs in the world can go off, and it makes not the slightest difference to stillness, does it? What is it anyway? What's peace? What's the difference? Silence, stillness, peace. But does one end and the other begin? And what's freedom anyway? Much the same, isn't it? Unity, peace and concord. Freedom, peace, presence. I think that's what Ed said, wasn't it? What did he come to see me for? He said, presence. Well, what's presence? Nothing to do with me, is it? It's this. You know, one of the easiest ways of accessing it is just to stop talking. And it's almost essential, isn't it? Because once we start talking, you lose it. So my dear, it's a good idea just to keep quiet. Honest, I'm serious. It's true, isn't it? You can see for yourself. Realize it. The tongue's a mischievous creature. Causes a lot of mischief. Much confusion. So, the practice may deepen and extend and without end. But of course, being human, we want to sort of classify it, give it names. But again, let's just come back to being still. Feel this invisible, silent presence. Now, what is spirit? Who knows what spirit is? Nobody knows what spirit is. Who knows what God is? Nobody knows what God is. We'll come back to silence, spirit, peace, presence, freedom. You might throw in love for good measure. Spirit. Sail off beyond the stars. And it's all so immediately here and now, isn't it? Yes, that's a good lesson to learn, that it's always now. We can never be closer, you see, to this than here and now. Past, future, you see, just and how naturally and easily, you see, all the trouble. You know, we fret so much about trying to sort out the mind and worry about it. It just settles down just like that. No problem at all. I was never too interested in these questions of what man is, but I know some people like to think about it. We can often approach these things by recognizing what we are not, by elimination. And see, when we find this silence and sort of expand into it a bit as far as we can, as I said, the body is left sitting on a chair, isn't it? So at least some of one's attachment to the body is let go, isn't it? Some of the fixation on the body. And the same with the mind. You may find that your mind becomes a bit less dominant. So, body, mind, spirit. What am I? Well, the body's going to die soon enough, isn't it? As yours will too. And the mind's changing from day to day, isn't it? Hour to hour, the mind. And yet this is always present, isn't it? Always the same. Anywhere in the world you can go and do this simple exercise and just be quiet and find this ever-present silence. This invisible friend that cannot fail, and everything else comes to pass. And when I started to discover this, and I thought of the old hymns I'd been taught at school, O thou that changest not, abide with me. Suddenly it all began to make sense. It became real. It's not belief, it's realizable. And really, it's dead simple. It's so, so simple. It's simplicity itself, isn't it? In fact, that's once I was given a definition of God as simplicity itself. Very good. Never heard a better one. And what is truth? Truth is what never changes. And what in this room never changes. We can all go away, the house can fall down. Doesn't matter at all. This is ever present, isn't it? O thou that changeth not, abide with me. And the great realization is that with practice it can indeed abide with us if we learn to abide with it. You see, it is with us. This is a fact. It's like air, isn't it? We can never not be in air, like a fish. Fish can never not be in the sea, and we can never not be in this presence. It's we that are absent. This is the human problem, is that we are absent from the presence of God, and hence we get into difficulties. This is why we die, because we're absent from the source of life, so we die. It's easy, isn't it? Of course. What a secret it is to just stop talking and be quiet. Be still. There's a verse in the Psalms, isn't there? Be still and know that I am God. Indeed, if the body is a transitory instrument that we take for a while and then it dies, and the minds are, well, you know what the mind is. What is that doesn't die? O thou that changeth not, be still and know that I am God. And if I'm not the body and not the mind, well, what am I? It's obvious, isn't it? We just melt into the oneness. We just are reabsorbed into the oneness. From absence, we come home to the present. Come home, like the prodigal son. And you know what? It's never critical. It's never unkind. It's always welcoming. It gives us total liberty to go off and make fools of ourselves. You can feel it now, like the everlasting arms, can't you? Just holding us. Isn't it wonderful without any criticism, no matter how awful we are or how naughty we've been, what stupid things we've said and done. Talk about the love of God. Of course we don't know what it is. This is the glory of not knowing. Honestly, how small knowledge seems, doesn't it? Because see, what is knowledge? Knowledge is always putting things in little boxes, isn't it? It's labelling things. It's saying that this is this and this is that and that is that. This is all, well, you could call it all duality, you call it what you like. But you see, this is human knowledge, and human knowledge is foolishness to God. And this, you see, is accessed by what I call higher knowledge. Am I treading on a cable or something? I don't know. Anyway, a higher knowledge, which is you can call faith. You see, and in faith, it's not knowledge; it's a higher level of knowledge. So, well, there it is. Knowledge has its place, yeah, granted, it's all right, but you see, within this last few days, we've all been groping, and all the various talkers have been groping towards this, haven't they? That which brings it all together, that which, from which it all comes. This is where it starts from. Just like you can see here, here's the silence, isn't there? And which gradually sort of comes into first of all, mental thought, and then the mental thought gradually sort of crystallizes into things and divides, so you get separation, so you end up with what we call the world. But it's obvious it all comes from here, isn't it? You can see how it does, like this is still, and then the first vibrations talk, as Rupert was telling us earlier on. And so the whole thing is just crystallized spirit, really. Well, again, I've run out. Let's come back to science then.
Wish for whatever your heart desires, and the magic will unfurl.